Hello, I'm Dr. Hans Toki, and this is a brief tutorial on surveys. Surveys are one of those things that you've all taken at some point, be it a class evaluation, be it some market research somewhere, be it some poll you participated in. The problem with surveys is some of them are great and really well done. Other ones are terrible, and there's everything in between there. Indeed, one of the worst cases of a survey I ever came across was right after President Obama was elected. A survey came out within 24 hours that had conclusively surveyed 1,200 people. And the conclusion was that President Bush was the worst president of all time. How could it be in 24 hours you could have counted 1,200 people and then come up with a conclusion that the most recent president who lost was the worst of all time? We've asked this to numbers of students over the years, and it's hard to come to the basic problem of why the survey was bunk, really. Because there's no possible way for those 1,200 respondents to have had a methodically, analytically critical assessment of all previous presidents prior to this one. So it was impossible, the way the survey was created, for anyone to give a proper opinion. But it also, the way that question was leading, is the worst president made sure that those responding could say yes, he was, or no, he wasn't. And then I was suspicious about the methodology itself of using a telephone. There's no possible way you would have got everybody at home, because by that time, a lot of people were on their cell phones already. So it was not a legitimate survey, but boy, it made the media rounds. Why do I open with this? Because some of you will get drawn in to creating the biased survey. And I hope from learning from this tutorial and going through the process yourself, you will learn a little bit of how to create an unbiased and very valuable survey. Because there's been numbers of very valuable surveys that have been done over the years that have helped us in any number of things. But let's begin. There is a continuum model of research. What does this mean? Really two things. One, that there are two poles or extremes between opinions. So, on the one hand, an extreme yes, or an extreme no, or always, or never, extremes of one to the other. But then there is what we call continuum research over time. This is very much used in historical research, where we came from to where we are. So it moves from one place to the other in a direction. So for instance, what history told us at one point to what it tells us now to what it might tell us in the future. In longitudinal research, historical data is really important because it helps us to understand the background to a situation, a place, a geography, a group of people, and so forth. So we have these two continuum models, two poles or extremes, one to the other, a comparative really, or a longitudinal one place moving towards another. With that in mind, the Likert scale is the one used most these days in creating surveys. It creates, really what it usually does, it creates a simple 1 to 5 response between degrees of response from one extreme to the other extreme. Done well, it can give us good variance of what is happening in a quantitative statistical way of what opinion is. Done poorly, it really can taint an answer. We'll talk about this in a little bit. Or it might go actual response from A to E. It may actually craft various ways to answer the question that doesn't have a number nor the letter or position. It might have actually words. You might have taken one of these. In my classes, we administer the VALS survey, which attempts to do this. It really gives you all these variances of responses. Others, like Berkman's surveys and so on, and aptitude tests you might have done, also have these kind of variances of responses where it seems like you're answering all these sentences. But really what it's doing is it's quantifying your responses. In the background behind these are these extremes. So it creates a variance of opinion. So a Likert scale sets up this continuum between degrees of response. So what you're looking for in a Likert scale is neutrality. You have to be very careful when creating a Likert scale that you don't create leading questions to make people answer a certain way. So for instance, if I were to ask, the weather is nice, is poor. Why? Because you already said it's nice. So a Likert naturally might be it's always, it's usually, it's sometimes, it's rarely, it's never. So someone could say it's always nice, it's usually nice, it's sometimes nice, it's rarely nice, it's never nice. You can see the bias built in to this leading statement. A better way to ask this, which is neutrality and specificity, where we want to know a specific way a certain person intends this, would be, in your view, the weather is 1, always sunny, 2, usually sunny, 3, about the same sunny as rainy, 4, mostly rainy, 5, always rainy. I didn't even give a suggestion of snow or wind, which also factor into someone's opinion about the weather. But what I've done with the better response, I've narrowed the interpretation to how much sun or rain there is, making it very specific about a certain aspect. We could ask the same question in a different way. In your view, the weather is 1, always windy, 2, usually windy, 3, about the same amount of wind as no wind, 4, mostly no wind, 5, always calm. This would be important for someone who's going to locate perhaps to some kind of resort place and they don't want to be in the wind all the time. So wind matters. So even about weather, you can ask it many different specific ways. So good interviewing doesn't lead with generalized, the weather is nice statement that leads someone to neutrality or specificity. The VALS survey is a good example of the use of questioning. It repeats questions in certain ways over time and turns the phrase in different ways. So what happens is when you're taking a survey like this, many opinion surveys are written this in a good way, you can't really tell if they're changing the words or so on, but by repeatedly moving the discussion and making you answer, 50 questions or something, the idea is to get more specificity out of it. And the algorithm behind it outputs a specific outcome based on the prescribed rubric of the research itself. So on a well-constructed survey, like a VALS survey, those of you who want to look this up, VALS, you'll find it online and take it yourself. Millions of people have. It tells you a little bit about shopping behavior and how people you have certain worldviews, certain cultural identities, and so on, that determine what kind of stores a shopping mall would put up, which is how it's predominant use. Where do they come up with these good questions? While it's based on a theoretical background about how people think in culture and social science, and an ethnographic analysis. Ethnographic, where we try to find the graphing out or the writing about ethnicity, which is writing about a culture. So it's really a culture analysis is where the questions from the vowels have come from. So it's an excellent way to see how using multiple question forms in different ways and turning of the phrase gets to specificity and neutrality and prescribed outcomes which you might or might not agree with. Another type of survey isn't a quantitative survey where we get numbers, but it's a qualitative interview. We're trying to ask how, what, would, why, where, when, questions from individual people. So let's go back to weather. How do you decide what you believe about the weather? Would be one thing. So after they've taken a question, you would ask them, how did you decide that? So the weather changed. How would that affect your feelings about the weather? If you're in a good mood, does the weather better, even though it might be rainy? Or if you're in a bad mood, would sunny weather seem so hot and stuffy because I'm in a bad mood? Does it make a difference, the weather, and how you treat the rest of your day? These are probing second questions. Or how about this? You could go on their actual survey response and do follow-up questions. Your response stated that the weather is always sunny. How did you decide that? But the weather does change. What difference does this make in your day? Why do you think most people like sunny days compared to rainy days? And so on and so forth. So the qualitative interview gets to questions beyond that. Expanding on this qualitative interview is what we call an ethnographic-based qualitative interview. This is where you've already done a field study about a geography, about a culture, about a people, about a social phenomenon, and you want to support it with actual interviews of the people. So a typical ethnographic interview would be constructing 25 leading questions with follow-up answers. So you could do, for instance, 20 questions in full survey, Likert survey format to get a numerical quantitative, but then add another 40 minutes or so to this in talking back to the person about their responses. So the key with an ethnographic interview, you can't just go random respondents as you would with a random survey. It really has to reflect the people in your field research that you're doing. Key consultants here, people in a neighborhood who can help you find people, are really critical here. They do what's called the snowballing effect. And what this is like a snowball rolls down a hill and gathers steam and gathers size. So with key consultants, they do, well, I've got this friend of mine, can you help them with an interview? That person then talks to another and talks to another and talks to another. And this is a way to get insider data from people from a personal interview. This results then you transcribe and code with the same methods as you would a typical field note. And then you can insert these actual interview respondents into your final narrative. Ethnographic-based interviews are gold if you can get good ones into a good ethnographic narrative. And if you can do also a continuum response with them, that's even better. So I recommend students who are doing a field research, try this. Do a Likert continuum scale or even a continuum from how it was back then and their view from back then to now. And then go to some qualitative response interviews. Test yourself with the VALS survey, and you'll see what a good survey is.